Good evening, everyone. You're in the right place at the right time. This is Coast to Coast AM, blasting out of the Mojave Desert like a Scirocco, blazing across the land, into your town, into your home, slamming into your radio like a supercharged nanoparticle of dark energy, squeezing your brain, messing with your mind, and just maybe challenging your grip on that amorphous and elusive concept known as reality. Greetings from the boldest, bawdiest, most outrageous city in the world, the planetary capital of sun, fun, sin, sex, and secrets, my not-so-humble hometown, Las Vegas, Nevada. My name is George Knapp. I'm your host, your trail guide, your designated driver of the airwaves, at least for the next few hours. Thanks for staying up late to be with us tonight, or if you're listening to a stream link of the show, thanks for taking time out of your day to check in with us. I'm very confident we're going to make it worth your time. Good stuff coming up in this program. You know, for a couple of months, I've been telling you about this incident along the Colorado River. Something fell from the sky back in May and was quickly scooped up by helicopters. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be joined by two of the principal witnesses in that UFO crash case, ex-cop Frank Costigan and the guy known affectionately here as Houseboat Bob, or Bob on the River, who dropped out of sight for a while. We tried to have him on the program a couple of months ago, as you'll recall, and weren't able to pull that off, but he'll be here tonight. Also, I'll tell you about these Men in Black type agency folks that we encountered down there outside of Needles, California. I've been kind of teasing you about that for a while. Those of you who've been waiting to hear about that agency, the wait's about to end. And coming up at the top of the second hour, I'll be joined by historian and UFO author Richard Dolan. And I have an admission to make. You know, I didn't realize that Rich Dolan had been on the program with George Norrie earlier this month, just, 10 days ago or so. That show was broadcast from here in Las Vegas, and I know that George had several of the speakers from the Crash Retrieval Conference on the program for like 30 minutes each. I didn't get to hear the show. So when I asked the Coast producers to invite Rich Dolan on to join me, I didn't know he'd just been on, but I promise you, we have a lot of ground to cover, and this will not be repetitive at all. I had the pleasure of chatting with Mr. Dolan at the Las Vegas conference. We got into some really heavy stuff about disclosure, whether President-elect Obama might spill some beans about UFOs, or whether he will even be informed himself by, for lack of a better term, the keepers of the secrets. And I thought tonight we could talk about disclosure, whether it's a good idea, who would do it, how it would work, and how we might react. And in that same vein about UFO secrecy and government cover-up, I heard a theory from Rich Dolan about why government agencies jumped into this disinformation game, late 70s, early 80s, purposely spreading lies and bad information, spying on UFO groups, compiling dossiers on UFO researchers. And he's got a new take on that I think will be one of those aha moments for you, as it was for me. Anyway, I think he's one of the brightest minds and most honest researchers in the field, and he brings an historian's appreciation for the tiny details to the UFO subject, and I can't wait to get into it with him. First things first, though. Listeners will recall that during several programs that I've hosted over the past year, we've talked about the situation with America's wild horse herds, and it's pretty bad. And now it's even worse. A little recap for you. Since the early 1970s, wild horses and burros in this country have been protected. The American public spoke. We passed this Wild Horse and Burro Act in, I think, 1971. And the American people decided that these animals have a special place in our history and our culture, and they need to be preserved out in the wild. So the government created 300 of these HMAs, these horse management areas, encompassing millions of acres of public land. They're set aside for the horses. And about half the nation's wild horses live on ranges here in Nevada, about 30,000 of them. Well, here's what's been happening over the past couple of years. And if you've heard some of my earlier broadcasts about this, you got a general idea. About 40% of these horses have been rounded up in the last couple of years, snatched off the ranges, thrown into government corrals, and there are now more horses in captivity than there are out there on the public ranges. BLM, which is the agency that runs this program, it doesn't even pretend anymore that this is being done for the good of the horses. You know, these horses are not starving. They're not dying of thirst. They're thriving out on the range. The last several roundups that have been taking place here in Nevada were explained by BLM that they're rounding them up so that they don't starve in the future. They're fine now, but we think they might starve and be in trouble in the future. although they don't even pretend to do any actual range science in making these determinations and predictions. They just simply do it. Of the 300 HMAs, horse management areas, that have been set aside for horses, 100 of them have now been completely zeroed out. That is, there are no horses in them anymore. Those same areas that supposedly were too stressed for the horses, not enough water or forage, they now have sheep and cattle grazing on them since, ranchers pay grazing fees to the feds. Horses don't pay anything, and nor are they a game animal to be hunted for sport. I suppose if you could go out and shoot a horse and put its head on your wall somewhere, that horses would be protected, but they're not. BLM keeps gathering and gathering these horses, spending millions of dollars a year on more roundups, and it puts almost nothing, a mere pittance, into these programs to adopt the horses out, which is what the law calls them to do. There are some exceptions to that, of course, but some things that they do just for window dressing or good PR, but in general, this adoption stuff is an utter failure. So the horses get crowded into these pens. It costs a lot of money, your money, my money, to take care of them. Just a few weeks ago, BLM announced it can no longer afford to care for the horses. They're going to have to put them down. They would either kill them with a bullet or a bolt to the head, or they would sell them off en masse to, which means that they would probably go to slaughterhouses to be cut up into horse meat steaks. Essentially, BLM has done all this systematically over the past couple of years, and now it finds itself with all these horses, and it's kind of shrugging its shoulders like, hey, where'd all these horses come from? When it did it. The Bureau drove this train off the track and into the ditch, and now it's asking, hey, we're stuck in this ditch. How'd we get here? Last week, there was this disturbing report put out by the GAO. It used to be the General Accounting Office. Now it's called the Government Accountability Office, in which GAO agreed that the BLM needs the authority to move forward with mass euthanizations of horses, since it's just too expensive to keep them around anymore. And this was like a punch in the stomach to all these wild horse groups who've tried to lobby BLM to do more to adopt the horses out or to institute birth control measures, or as a last resort, let the horses back out on the ranges that are set aside for them, to fend for themselves. It doesn't cost anything to feed a wild horse that's left in the wild. Well, tomorrow, that is November 16th, in Reno, Nevada, the National Wild Horse and Burro Advisory Commission will meet to talk about this GAO report. And given the makeup of this commission, it seems unlikely it's going to go against the BLM or the GAO. So, we could start seeing very soon the deaths of these wild horses sooner than anyone might want to admit. Or maybe we won't see them. Maybe it'll happen in the dead of night. They'll just ship them off to Mexico in a truck to become horse burgers or dog food or both. If you are at all interested in this issue, you might want to send an email to a couple of places, to President-elect Obama, for one. Wild horse groups are hoping that the BLM will at least hold off until a new administration's in place before any drastic decisions are made. Let somebody else make that decision. There are some wild horse groups that we've highlighted in the past on this program. I think there are some links on Coast's website still from those shows. We had a guy named Jerry Reynoldson on the program last month. There's also a group called the Cloud Foundation in Colorado. They do a lot of work with a singer, Sheryl Crow, who was in Las Vegas this week and sought us out and wanted an interview because she's upset and worried about what decisions might be made at this Wild Horse Advisory Commission meeting on Monday. So if this is an issue that tugs at your heart or interests you at all, you might want to give it some thought. It's about more than just horses. It's about our public lands and our public money and how they're managed and who they really belong to. I mention this because so many of the Coast listeners have responded to the story in the past when we've talked about it on the program, so I thought you'd want to know where it stands. We're going to take a short break, get to a couple of other news items, and then talk to Frank Costigan and Houseboat Bob. Stay with us on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast. My name is George Knapp. Thanks for being with us here for this program. A couple of news items. This one is from Brazil. A writer and publisher down there, friend of the program, A.J. Gavard, reports that Brazil just experienced its first ever crop formations. There were two of them spotted on November 9th in the state of Santa Catarina. Witnesses also reported seeing weird lights, I guess, in the sky just prior to the formations being discovered. These are kind of big ones, too. Not quite as geometrically dramatic as some of the ones seen in England, but pretty cool anyway. Analysis is underway. And we got some pictures in the link on the Coast to Coast site if you want to take a peek. While you're there, you might want to check out another item